Oh my goodness. It's so good to be talking to you.
I know. It's so good. It's been we've had like a couple weeks since we've recorded. A lot has happened.
Yeah, a lot has happened. Yeah.
You are now, I'm speaking to Mrs. Traeger. Yeah.
Sarah Traeger. But I am going to keep my business name the same, I think, just for simplicity. Ben also likes the idea of having our name out of the spotlight, which I'm just like...
For Ben.
That feels so weird to say. I'm like, what spotlight? He's like, I don't know. There's like 40,000 followers spotlight on Instagram. That's weird.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
It goes back to me not feeling like it's real. Right, like I still feel like nothing in life is real. So there's that. What were you thinking about? I was just
thinking like how you would even go about like changing the name. It would be so complicated. I'm glad you're keeping everything as is.
I guess, although I'm watching the Kanye West documentary and I'm like, look, Puff Daddy changed back to Sean Combs in the middle of his career.
Puff Daddy could do it. Is Puff Daddy your new expander?
Puff Daddy can change. I did have that thought last night. I was like, look, if Puff Daddy can change his name and like all things didn't break, that's fine. I can too.
That's hysterical. Oh my God, I love that so much.
But no, I mean, Ben's the one trying to convince me not to change it on my business. And I get it. He's like, nah, this can be your family name. And there's your business name. And, like, family life.
Yeah.
And then there's your business name. That's just like,
it's like a separate. I mean, there's something about that distinction that maybe is kind of nice, or it gives like a little bit of insulation to privacy. I don't know.
Yeah, I like it. I'm into it. The only part that kind of makes me sad is because I'm writing a book right now, and leaving my agency name and all that is the same. But I'm like, oh, I'm gonna start writing books, and the name on the book isn't going to be like our family name. Huh. That one makes me sad. That's the one. But
I wonder if you could write something in the book about that. Just like in like acknowledgments or just like in a part where you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to deal with it. It's a weird thing, actually. When I was younger, I was like, I'm never changing my name. And I actually had a friend in college who changed my mind about it because his mom was like that, very fierce, independent, entrepreneurial woman. And he told me this whole story about how it made him sad as a kid not having the same name as his mom because people didn't know or even believe that was his mom. Like in school, in situations like that, he was like, it kind of created this like divide in me as a kid into how I viewed her as like part of the family. And I was like, whoa. And that's actually stuck with me.
That's interesting. It's interesting that they didn't like give him like a hyphenated last name and give them both of their last names. It's like interesting that they just gave their kids the father's last name also.
Yeah, I don't know. She just was like a fierce feminist who was like, I ain't taking no man.
I feel like if I did that, I'd want my kid to have like also have my both names, all the names. Both. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. I think she thought it was annoying for him to have a hyphenated last name, which it is, because I had friends growing up where their names were hyphenated and it caused them problems too.
I like the idea of getting married to somebody and just inventing a new name.
Whoa. Like just I love this idea.
I mean, unless like I get that some people have like this legacy of a last name, like fucking like Starhawk. Like why not? Why my name could be Emily Starhawk if I wanted to. There's nothing stopping me. Or just
Starhawk. For you guys who are like, what in the heck are you two talking about? I'm reading this book called The Fifth Sacred Thing that I had a man at Genius Network recommended this book to me, by the way, which I find fascinating because it's about like ecofeminism. In like a
dystopian future, isn't it?
Which I like.
Fucking love it.
Yes. I feel like you should be reading this book with me.
It's in the mail. It is coming to me.
Okay. It's honestly like when he described this book, I was like, this feels like a book Emily would recommend to me.
I love that this book exists.
Yes. And it's like from 1993.
I love it even more now.
And the thing is that's crazy about it is it feels so relevant to today.
I love
like
those
it's crazy.
books.
There's like an epidemic.
Oh, okay.
There's a pandemic going on. And they're trying to figure out if it's like a weaponized virus. And I'm like,
living
oh,
in this.
shit. I'm like, this woman was
That's
like
amazing.
onto something. Anyway, yeah. And so when I was just like thinking about her and I looked up her Wikipedia page and I sent it to you the other night because I was like, have you heard of this woman? Because I feel like you would love this woman. Because she's just all about reinventing the way we like think about the future. I love it because it's so creative. And every chapter so far, I'm like,
I love that. Okay.
Like her creativity and her way of like imagining things is so outside of anything that I feel like I could have ever come up with on my own.
Oh, I'm so excited to start reading it. And her name is just Starhawk. It's just...
Yeah, and that's her name,
which I just love. Yeah,
and she's just this like eco-feminist activist, and also the way in which she talks about different things are so. Like I really like how she talks about sex. Like everyone in the book is like
how she talks about sex.
Yeah, because everything because she talks about sex as if it's like a means of like connecting. And so literally every character is bisexual.
Nice. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's just like, I'm like, what? And it's just not what I expected at all, that she was going to have this big like matriarchal society, but like
everyone's queer. Yeah.
Everyone's queer, except for the people living in the like ultra religious.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's amazing.
God. It's so fun.
What was that quote I sent you about Aries that made me laugh so hard? Wait, I have to look it up because you were like, was dying laughing and I couldn't wait to. Okay, I was just reading about Aries Sagittarius connections because that's what I do when I'm just like lounging around by myself.
This is. Yes, no, but you're not a mystic. Me. She's not a mystic and rejects that label completely.
But I was reading about Aries and this like sentence, I just cried laughing. And it says, Aries is passionate when it comes to action, new things, and of course, naked people in specific sexual positions. And I love how it's just like naked people. Just
naked people. I was like, oh my gosh. Because I just really wish everybody was so much more comfortable being naked. And like, my mom growing up would always come upstairs. This is like a thing that happened like almost every day. Because I like to, after I take a shower, hang out naked for a while.
Right away.
Yeah, I don't like to put clothes on right away. In fact, sometimes I'll just be naked for the rest of the night. And like be in a really cozy blanket. And my mom would come up the stairs and I'd just be hanging out naked and she'd be like, why are you always naked? Yeah. But it was like, she thought it was hilarious. She was like, you're always naked. You're just hanging out in your room naked. I'm like, yeah, I need my naked time before I put on clothes.
That. And that's just how you've always been.
I've always been that way. Like she just like, as a kid, she was always trying to keep clothes on me. And I was like, why? It's like, I've always found clothes to be, I think that's also like, I like only wear things if they're super, super soft. I stopped wearing bras like when I went to Bali. And I like, it was too hot to wear bras. And then I was like, what are these like awful contraptions? Like underwire?
It hurts. It's like,
is all like,
I don't know.
Who? Why?
Yeah, no.
I'm like, no more. No more. Anyway, this was a mega tangent because what I really wanted to talk about was this awesome event I went to called Genius Network.
Where you found Starhawk, the Starhawk book.
Yes. From a lovely human. And I just love that it was a man who was like, have you, in talking, because I was actually trying to convince him to start a farm on his property. Nice. Because he has 6 acres in like Topanga, which is like outside of LA. And I was like, what? You could have bees, you could have ducks. And I was like, I was like going down this path with him. Anyway, he's very much into virtual reality and into like doing personal development work with virtual reality.
Virtual reality. Yeah, that's cool.
Yes, like meditative, breath works, yoga, all kinds of things. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like our future, isn't it? And he was just talking a lot about like the ethics around virtual reality. Anyway, this whole weekend was such a lovely weekend. I had to like take breaks multiple times and call you.
Yeah, to like distill.
To download all the things I was learning. And one of my favorite things that I heard actually was a quick line from Derek Sivers, who was the creator of CD Baby, which is, if you're not familiar with CD Baby, is like one of the classic examples in the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss of somebody who, I don't know, just like the new way of entrepreneurship and how it's accessible to like the everyman and how you don't have to like have gotten an MBA from Wharton School of Business to like be a successful entrepreneur. Like, so he's like very much a classic example of that. The new age entrepreneur, if you will. Anyway, he spoke, he gave like a keynote, and he's just so lovely. Like he's got a very like calm presence. He's the first person I've ever heard talk about us as parts
in that realm.
In this realm. And it was new for like everyone in the room for the most part, from what I could tell. Like people were like, thinking of us as parts. And I'm like, that's our shit.
This is our jam.
Yeah, this is our jam. So that was really cool. But one of the lines that he said that he was like, I've been really like having a little bit of a thought experiment around this, was that beliefs are helpful, but not true. And I loved that line because it was such an important and simplified way to kind of touch on what we are talking about here so much and how we really do choose, I think, our beliefs consciously and subconsciously to make sense of the world and to kind of create an identity. And when you know that, you have so much more say in what you choose as your beliefs. And I think that's like a really important thing. And I know we've kind of like touched on this in like a couple of different ways, but I think it's so important to call out that
specifically.
Explicitly. Yeah, because it's so important to remember that you can actively choose your beliefs. And when you do that, life can be more fun. It can be more playful. And also, it's a good, healthy reminder that other people's beliefs are not untrue for the most part, you know? And they come from us from a particular place. And I think right now we need that reminder more than ever.
Yeah. I love this train of thought so much because it kind of, at the core of it is really remembering how we are all so distinctly unique. And we're such a collection of experiences that have defined these belief systems that we have in us. And in that, we all are the same, which is that the loop, right? Where in our like complete individuality, we're all the same. And there's things that you can grab onto with that way of thinking. But when you hear that sentence, like beliefs are helpful, but untrue.
Not untrue, not true.
Can you say it again?
Yeah, beliefs are helpful, but not true.
But not true. Yeah.
And I think that the difference there is that for them to not be true, it just means that they're like not absolute.
They're not universal. Yeah. Yeah.
They're not universal. They're not absolute. They're basically based in what we know right now.
Yeah.
And that differs from person to person. So I think, anyway. Yeah. Sorry. What was your question?
My question is like, how does that feel for you to hear something like that? Like, I'm curious if it's like exciting. Relieving. It's exciting for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because like when you first said that to me, there was a part of me, most of me was like excited and felt almost like relieved, like, oh yeah, that's so in alignment with like what we talk about a lot. But there was a small part of me that felt sad about it.
Oh, I yes. Tell me more about that.
I think it's just this part of me that had maybe at one time, my identity was so wrapped up in my beliefs. Actually, that was all my identity is like what my beliefs were about the world. And that's where I made all my decisions from, and not from like a place of just, okay, here it is. I don't know. I think like there's such a big part of me that developed underneath this idea that the beliefs that were handed to me were fundamental, were universal, and were absolute truth. And when somebody tells you this is absolute truth, there's something about that that's like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry then. Like, I don't have to figure it out. You're telling me what absolute truth is. I think that's the appeal. That's the huge appeal to like belief systems or religions that say this is truth, because you're just like, it's like man's hunt for truth, like is just an archetypal thing over the course of all of history. And so the idea that there is not like maybe universal truth and truth is relative, I think for people, this part of me, maybe other people that like find or have found safety in the idea of fundamental truth, it can be really scary. I actually think that's a big reason why a lot of people avoid this kind of discussion or avoid even considering the idea that truth is relative from person to person, because you have to admit then that like we really just don't know. You know, the unknown is like the only consistent thing.
It's interesting to hear you say that. I'm actually like not surprised at all. We often have like very different reactions to these things. And that's what I love about you. I think for me, I definitely have acknowledged, even from when I was younger and going through my whole like figuring out what I believed as far as like religion goes, I do think that I have like a certain level of comfort with unknowns that a lot of people don't experience. I think that's also in part, I mean, I could go down a whole nother like tangent where like people do this with science, where they make that like their whole new dogma. And if it can't be proved with science and therefore it's not real and blah, blah, blah. And when I like came to the realization that like, wow, science creates so many blind spots for itself by thinking that it has like the absolute truth, when in fact we're constantly like disproving and realizing how much bias plays a role in like so many things. I think I realized actually through that whole time period, which was probably when I was like 20 or so, that like I had to get comfortable with unknowns, because that's like, and so for me, I think it is an actual like choice to not even just be uncomfortable, but to try and find like the amusement in it.
The excitement, the
excitement. Because even like reading this book, which I could see how this book would be really scary and depressing for people, because it's pretty dark. Like it starts out very hardcore, like trigger warning, like first chapter 2, like a mom like dies while giving birth in this like pandemic. And they're living in this, they're like, the world is toxic and has been like just destroyed by humans. And they're and like, they're just having pandemic after pandemic after pandemic. And it's like, with everything that's going on, quite honestly, it doesn't feel that unrealistic. Like it feels like it could like be a real future for ourselves.
Wow.
And it was interesting because I was like, wow, I could see how this would be. I was like, I wonder if Emily's going to find this really depressing. But for me, what kept coming up for me, I think it's like, I don't know, the fiery bits of me where I was just like, if this is our future, like I will fucking fight.
Like, of course.
It's like the fighter in me. Yes. But like it was more like, okay, how do we prepare for this? And what will we do? Because the thing is I do have this like this faith in our resourcefulness and our ability to overcome and to collaborate and to have huge like impacts when we're like pushed. I mean, this was a thought experiment that we did in one of my college classes, where we broke into like, who thinks the world's going to come to an end and it's hopeless? Who like thinks the world is going to come to an end, but we have hope? And who thinks we're going to make changes just in the nick of time? And I was like the only person that fell into this one category, me and this other person, and we ended up becoming friends over it. But it was like, I don't think we're going to make big changes until things are really fucked up. But I think that what is going to end up happening is we're going to be forced to make really incredible changes that will ultimately be for the best. So it's like, I think I kind of move through life almost like expecting that and feeling like I'm just going to do whatever I can to like fight and show up and be there for it as best as I can. And I think it like activates very much like a warrior side of me. Because what's the use of being depressed about all of that, really? I've done the sad, depressed, everything's meaningless, and that's very uncomfortable for me. So maybe in some ways this is a coping mechanism, but I also just like don't see like the point of it.
It's not very productive, like that.
Because here's the thing, and I think it comes back to my sobriety. Sorry, I have like so many thoughts today.
Go for it.
Like, I feel like I'm very scattered, but in my brain it makes sense. I just can't get it out fast enough is what's happening. I think because I've been also like the last few days been thinking so much about how much a gift my struggles with alcohol really has been in my life. And it's like I've been in that dark, hopeless place before, and I couldn't do any good in the world. And it just made me so destructive. And I really feel that way about everything that's going on, like globally with Ukraine, and how I'm seeing people are just like so taking that on, and it's like crippling them. And I remember being like that, like being so crippled by like the news and feeling like everything was pointless. And I just couldn't give anything positive to the world from that place. I guess that was a very like scattered way of thinking that I've done the whole destructive empath thing where I just like feel all the despair and all the hopelessness, but I just don't think that that's where like a new world is going to come from. And I really would like to be a part in whatever way that looks like in reimagining that. And so I think that's to me why when you can really see that beliefs are so much of it is chosen, and therefore you can kind of reduce the drama in your life to maybe thrive so that you can actually give back and help in the world. Like that's why it's not depressing to me.
Yeah.
I feel like that was so scattered. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
I think some of my thoughts in reflection to that are just like this idea of like this negative feedback loop, like when that's all you're consuming and that's how you're digesting it. And that's literally what you put back out in the world. You're putting out this anxious negativity, and that really like drags things down, right? And you hear people talk about like low vibration, high vibration. I kind of like the idea of, have you ever heard people talk about how just every interaction or anything that you do is either +1, like a -1, or a 0? Either you're having a positive effect, or you're having a negative effect, or you're having like a neutral space. It's interesting to think, because I think a lot of people like strive just to get to neutral. Like, I just want to get to a place where I'm feeling like
I've been there.
Whole idea of like going a step above that and being in a positive feedback loop and actually offering back to the world good stuff and like solving problems.
Yeah. I think that's like the most important thing is like, if you are not caring for yourself and getting yourself to a beyond just like survival baseline, your ability to make the world a better place is like impossible. But we have all these beliefs around self-sacrifice, and it's like almost like a lot of us don't even feel like we're deserving of the fucking basics, really. You know? And so so many of us are living in this survival mode, and I really feel like the media like perpetuates that with so much fear. And I've even been like really questioning the idea of like being informed, because that's a whole thing. Is like people like, you got to watch the news so that you're informed. And yes, Ben and I get in this debate all the time, actually. I'm like, but what are you doing with that information? Right. If it's just like depressing you and you can't function on a day-to-day basis, and you can't, you know what? Because right now, the situation with Ukraine, the best things that you can do are like donate to something that's helping. I mean, this is the only thing I can think of what I can do, or to maybe spread quality information, but that feels like a big gray area these days. And to understand what's going on, and then to take actions in areas that are actually like going to have a net positive effect. But if you are like, because I've been there where you're just like so consumed by all of it that you can't even exist in the world to where you can earn enough money so you can afford to be able to donate to worthy causes. Like what?
Yes.
Like what is the use in being informed if you cannot
have
like
a positive
you
effect?
Cannot, if you if you cannot have a positive effect. I feel like we got to read that quote from that post you posted.
Oh, it's so brilliant. I could pull it up really quick. And I do think, though, it's interesting because we could dig into what is the motivation around wanting to be informed. I'm curious if it's a lot less to do with wanting to have a positive effect and a lot more to do with how you want to come across to the people in your group.
Yes. Yes. It's virtue signaling.
Or it's wanting to come across as intelligent or even wanting to be 100%. Able to like hold your own in an argument. You know, if you were going to have an argument, and none of those, like, those are all very ego driven, all of them.
Yeah. Because this is the thing. I will say, because I had this conversation with Ben and I was like, what are you doing with this information? And one thing that I noticed with him is I don't think it consumes him as much as it consumes me. He can watch the news, become informed and educated. I, on the other hand, if I get too far down that rabbit hole, I'm like a hot mess and can't function and like want to drink my sorrows away and don't want to do work and don't want to show up for like my clients. And it's just like, what is the fucking point?
Same.
I mean,
big same. Big same.
So I think there's like also it's important to distinguish between people who are like highly empathetic and then also knowing that like if you are not able to take that information and do something positive with it and it is just destroying you, I don't think that is worth being informed over.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah.
Because we need all those highly empathetic people to be creating like beautiful things and lifting other people up. And if they are not up themselves to be able to turn around and lift someone up, like this is not good for the world, in my opinion. Yeah. Like I'm seeing people on Instagram saying things like artists and stuff, like I can't create art when the world is like this. And I'm like, is that really the way that we do things? We stop creating art because there's like horrific things going on. I would argue that like the Viktor Frankls of the world, you know, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning and went through concentration camps, he would argue like definitely do not stop creating art. That's actually like what keeps us alive and thriving and creating a better like world for each other. I don't know. This went in like a way different tangent.
I think it's a good point to make. And it always comes back to like, you need to get really clear on like what works for you. And if you feel like this is dragging you down, then you need to set up some boundaries. Or if you're a person that can consume the news and you have good categorizing abilities in your mind and you're able to stay informed and that's like a positive thing and that comes from a place of that feels good and that lifts you up to stay informed about all the things, then do it.
Or if you're the person who hears all this and then you're the activist who actually like makes some impactful change and it's like the fuel to your fire, like you are the people we need, like that's great. And those are the ones I think who were like staying informed and on top of things. It's like actually like really powerful for us as like a collective. But I think more often than not, we've got the people who need to work on what they can do in their like immediate community, because those ripple effects that you can have when you are like raising your baselines, taking care of yourself and your family, that's not insignificant. But we're made to think that it is. We're made to think that like, how dare I experience joy when this thing is going on in the world? But you know what? Shitty things are always going on. And if we are not actively taking care of ourselves to be able to like have a positive impact, like then literally like, what is the fucking point? And that's why the whole like staying informed at all costs is just something I've been really like grappling with lately. I'm like, and I think that's like kind of perpetuated by like the media, quite honestly, because it's such an easy thing that you could use like as a copywriter. This is like the marketing technique. If you're not informed, you're going to look like a fool. You're going to seem like you don't care.
Yes.
Right. But the thing is like maybe for me, it's like I care so damn much that I can't be consuming just constant information because it will like cripple me. And then I can't like go out and like lift people up and the way that I feel like I'm supposed to be lifting people up, which is like my role on this earth, which isn't the same as your role on this earth.
This is such a good thing to push back on, this like whole idea of staying informed at all costs. It's this idea of like your energy is sacred.
Yeah.
It is not just there to be drained all the time by whoever wants to drain it. It's like a sacred thing that can bring like a lot of positive like effect into the world, or it can be drained and like be a black hole, you know, and getting good at knowing what is filling you up, like what's filling you, what's draining you, and protecting that energy. Cause like I can get into spaces where I have too many channels of input coming into like my whole space and into my mind, whether it's social media or even TV or a book or people, certain people, or whatever it is. Like you're dealing with a constant onslaught of like information and energy coming at you. And sometimes I can get into a place where if I have too much of that going on, I feel like I flatline. Like I feel like it just cancels me out in a big way. And that's a lot of times like when I'll like take a break from social media, or I'll like have like a little bit of a reset, because when you are constantly having all this input, it can get really noisy and it can be really hard to hear your intuition and what's really going on inside of you and like your own guidance system. You can get like really lost and confused. And if your guidance system is trying to get you to like start a book drive at your local library because that's like going to bring you joy and like help your local community and stuff like that, but you can't even think about it because you're so overwhelmed with the news and all the other like bullshit coming at you. That's the thing. It's like we got to slow down and dial in, get really clear on like what your thing is, and you protect that in a big way. And maybe, like you said, maybe your thing is activism. Maybe it is getting positive, good information out there and communicating. Like that is vital and crucial. But it's like if we were all doing our thing, like if we were all listening to that inner guidance system and doing our thing, that's what makes the world a better place, is like getting really clear on that. Yeah.
I agree. And remembering that that's going to be different for everyone. Because that's something I actually struggled with and had a lot of judgments around when I was in my like early 20s. And I remember it being like an actual moment where I was like, you know what? Everyone has to have their thing, because that's what there's no way we can be all the things for like this world and this community. And I think that we really struggle with minimizing each other's thing. And I think that's a problem, because we think, okay, why would I start this book drive or whatever? There's like a potential like world war about to break out.
Insignificant like in comparison.
It's so insignificant. And I get in that trap of thinking, but like at the end of the day, that is hurting us. I really think it is. Do you want to share that Instagram caption? Because I'm kind of obsessed with it. I've read it like 3 times, and I've made Ben listen to it for a few times. And I had my friend reach out to me, who, you know, Shannon, she was like, she never gets on Instagram, but she was like, I was so scared, like afraid. I got on to scroll mindlessly because everything in the world is like freaking me out. And she goes, and I found this Instagram quote or caption or whatever. And she was like, and this is exactly what I needed to hear. And she was like bowing out.
She just came and got her piece and left. Yeah.
She was like, this is what I needed. Now I'm going to back out.
When I came across this, because I've been struggling a little bit with fear, also with like, I think it's worth saying there is a massive amount of like emotional fatigue that we are collectively going through, I think on a level that, I mean, hasn't been seen in lifetimes.
I think it's the side effect of being so globalized and having access to all this information. I mean, when you just knew what was going on in your community, it was so much more like manageable.
Yes. I mean, that's been the case, you know, since we've had the internet and all that stuff. But I guess I'm talking about like we're in year 3, right, of this like pandemic situation. We've normalized things that are really difficult and maybe not the best for a lot of us. And I think that there's like a massive amount of like fatigue going on. And so I've been seeing a lot of people be like, the response to everything that's happening is just like, I cannot believe this is happening. I do not have another single ounce of like energy to like give to this. And it just is almost this like despair is what I've been seeing, is like, and it's just like, in my heart, like I feel like if I wasn't really trying to protect myself that's where I would be. I would feel that despair in a huge way, you know?
I've been there. I've lived a life where I like got in that despair, and I just saw how harmful it was for myself and to the people around me.
So this man is brilliant. His name is Xavier Dagba on Instagram. He is like this conscious thought leader. His approach is so unique and stands out to me amongst like a lot of the people that I learn from and, you know, try to like expose myself to, I guess.
I mean, when I started looking through his stuff, I was like, oh, whoa, this guy's next level.
Yeah, he calls himself an emotional alchemist, which I love. So this post is kind of long, but I guess to like kind of touch on it, he says, my ego. What the fuck is happening? Again, can I get a break? Right? That's what this like fatigue. And then he says, my soul says, see through the illusion. Don't take the bait of fear. Remain heart-centered. Send peace to those who can't connect with it. Be the anchor of a new paradigm. And he goes into this whole like reminder around remaining anchored. There's never been a better time to practice vibrational precision, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier, like the +1, -1. Your anxiety, your outrage, your fear all have huge creative power. They will most likely be used to create what you don't want if compassion is out of reach. That is like so huge.
I love that, because that's the thing, right? That's what's happening when you allow yourself to be so consumed, maybe under the guise of feeling like you need to be informed. I'm not saying like don't know what's going on, by the way, but you end up becoming the thing that you like don't want in the world. That was me. For sure. When I was like living a life where I was so consumed by all of this stuff. I mean, I was a disaster and hurtful to myself and others.
Yeah. And this whole idea that, because what it's doing is it's fear, right? It's fear probably fueled with like anger in there too. But I like this like concept of how that doesn't leave any room for compassion and to have compassion for yourself and other people in when things are like really hard. I don't know. I like how he kind of goes into, because he says like, it's not a time to keep your head in the sand, but you need to ask yourself, how am I relating to the information I'm consuming? What am I doing with what I'm seeing? Is it causing me to disown my joy in order to match the collective frequency? Like these questions, like inform yourself and ask these questions to yourself. That'll help you get like really clear on like, is this in alignment with your internal guidance system?
I want to just touch on, I really think that one of the things that really stuck out to me is I was like, oh, wow. I do think that to some degree, I did this. I used to do this. And also, I think people do this, is you kind of like fall in line with the despair because you believe that's how you're supposed to like act.
Right.
And that's like what is like noble or virtuous or right. Because how dare you experience joy?
Have joy when the world is. Yeah. Oh, that is so huge. Like that what you just said there. Like, and it's scary. Like the thought of like having joy in the midst of whatever, like that's kind of scary. Like what would people say? Will they think that you're being careless? Like that you don't actually care about what's happening? Like you were saying earlier, because nobody wants to come across like you don't give a shit about important things, you know?
For sure. My new answer has been I care too much.
Yeah.
Because I have a friend who's like very like politically like he loves to get into political debates. And when I say like, you know, I stopped kind of over consuming media. And so I don't really have enough information to like get into like the nuances of this debate. I mean, this is like what he does. This is his thing, right? Is to know all of the ins and outs. So I can't keep up with him. I mean, that's been my response to him is because he's never been, he knows me. So he knows that's not that I don't care, but I'm like, I care too much. Like I really care so much that if I like over consume this information, I will be a disaster and not helpful.
Yeah. And it's going to have a really negative effect on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Anyway, back to the thing.
The thing. Well, I don't know. Do you want me to keep reading that thing?
Yeah, I think it's so good. There's so many parts.
Yeah.
I just have enjoyed also talking about it as you go.
Okay, yeah, this is great. Oh, yeah, look at here. Can I care and not choose to despair? He literally says it. Like, yes, like I want to know what that looks like, because it's also pushing back on this idea that suffering is virtuous, yes. right? Like if you really cared, you would be suffering, and that's what's virtuous. And that we need to like push back on that. Mm-hmm. And like, can you be deeply, sincerely invested in what's happening and a joyful person?
And I believe you can. I really believe you can.
Yeah.
A younger version of me would not have agreed with that, but.
Right. What else does he say? He says, can I be a bridge for peace? Can I use my consciousness to amplify in the field the peace that others crave? Well, that's the whole idea of your joy is contagious. Your peace is going to give other people reassurance. So when you're operating with the collective despair, you're just creating that negative feedback loop. Mm-hmm. And that's just like what's going to keep happening. But if you disrupt that cycle at the risk of maybe coming across like you're not suffering, so you're not like, you don't care. But like, what if like your joy is contagious or your peace brings reassurance to other people? This whole idea of amplifying your energy into other people became so crystallized in me when I had kids. Cause like, I mean, before then, what I had like friends, my partner or whatever that like, sure, I knew if I was like in a cranky mood, it would affect the people close to me, but never before like with my kids, I could not even say or do a single thing, but like inside I'm feeling like sad and they're just like crying. There were times actually when my girls were like little, there were times that I didn't even know I was like feeling a thing until like they essentially pointed it out with how they were behaving.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh.
why are my kids so anxious right now? And then I'm like, it's because I'm a fucking anxious mess and I'm not even like aware of it or tuned into it. But I think that on a larger scale, that's like real. Like you're putting that out there constantly. And what are you putting out? Like, is it despair? Is it fear? Or is it joy and peace? I love that idea. And he goes, can I witness chaos and still choose to remain intimate with my soul? Like each one of these sentences, I'm just like, oh. And then he says, and if you can't, it's okay to unplug.
Yes.
If you cannot consume this information and retain that, like, I like how he says his like intimacy with the soul. And it's kind of like what I mean when I say like connected to your internal guidance system or your intuition, A fear-riddled consciousness serves no one except those who thrive in darkness.
That one was where I was like, freaking men. Seriously. Yeah. That's like the thing is because we have these ways of doing things. We have our beliefs around what it means to be a good person and a virtuous person and showing up in the world, but we don't often examine them. And I just know because I've lived that life of being the overly highly sensitive person and overly empathetic. And like, I still am that, but I've just gotten better at protecting my energy so that I can have a net positive ripple effect in my life. And I think that it's important to remember, I really would love to see more of an emphasis on people really reconnecting with their smaller community, their more immediate community, because I really think that's where most of us are going to have the big impact. There are going to be the people, the outliers who impact like the global economy. But like, quite frankly, most of us, our work is in like the immediate circle right around us. And that's okay. Yeah. We haven't like gotten back to that. Like we don't value that really. Unless we hear like an incredible story of somebody who's like had an impact in their community, you know what I mean? And we're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. But like, we don't emphasize the value in that. But I think it's like really where most of our power like lies is in that.
This is so huge. I mean, with the internet and social media where our communities are now online, right? And people can feel like they have a lot of their needs met, I guess, with these like digital communities, that it's really easy to forget what are the needs like in my neighborhood or with the people around me in my like immediate surroundings. Yeah. So I have this thought that I've been stirring around in my mind, and I think it kind of goes along with this whole idea of beliefs are relative and talking about how everyone is so distinct and so unique. And it's this idea of like correctness, which I think is kind of in alignment with staying informed. But I've noticed that there's just this like obsession with correctness. I mean, it even goes down to like how people have to like fact check everything now again. And like, if you make a mistake and say the wrong thing or whatever. And I'm talking about like things that are not harmful. I do think if you're like talking about stuff that could potentially like cause harm, you need to have your facts in alignment with that, especially like, you know, whatever. But if you're just like talking about ideas and you get the definition of some term wrong, or you didn't understand the origin of this movement or whatever, and having people write you off because you were not correct, I feel like that is so limiting. Mm-hmm. It kind of goes back to like the thing that you say about how, the blind spots in science. I feel like the obsession with correctness is so limiting and actually like can slow things like way down. And I love how we are approaching this whole conversation like that's not the point for us. The point for us isn't to be like correct for everybody all the time. No. The point is like we're exploring, we're doing like some inner exploration into like our experiences, whatever. But like, I don't know, have you like bumped up against that at all?
Oh yeah. Even like having this conversation, I'm noticing there's like even a little bit of resistance or something to saying these things, because it so easily can be taken, I think, and twisted as like privilege or I don't know. It just goes against so much of what we've been taught around being informed so that you can be as like correct as possible. I've actually like practiced in the last few years with saying I don't know to things. And I gotta say, it's like incredibly freeing. Like you don't, I bet, just like, because it's a thing that we like really struggle with. I'm like, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. Or I came to that conclusion when I was really into like researching that thing, but it's been a while since I've looked into it. I'm not sure. Like,
yeah.
The need to be correct is this overwhelming thing. Actually, you know what's been interesting since I've recently gone through the Judaism like conversion process and learning about Judaism? They don't have this. This is not a part of their core beliefs. This is a Christian thing.
Like facts.
Not facts, but the idea that you need to know everything. In fact, there's a big celebration, and a core part of their beliefs is in the unknown. So like we had this whole class where they were like, what do you say when a kid asks you like what happens when you die? And the Jewish answer is we don't know. We have a lot of theories and people have a lot of beliefs. The Jewish answer to the question of like what is God or who is God is we don't know. But we have a lot of like conversations and debates and like conversations and debates and acknowledging the unknown is a core part of the philosophy of like Judaism. And like, as we were going through this class, I was like, I just didn't realize how much of like that came from, I think, Christianity.
Yeah. This fundamentalism. Yeah.
Until I was like learning that in Judaism, like debate, conversation, the unknown, acknowledging that there are unknowns, acknowledging that our belief systems are like what we think is the best answer for right now, but like that might change. That's like a core like belief in Judaism. And I can't tell you the number of times I looked at Ben and I was like, this is kind of like insane to me. Right. Because this is so different from how I was raised, where it's like they would give you answers even when they know they don't really know.
This is the truth. Yeah.
Anyway.
See, I'm like vicariously getting to like learn about Judaism through you. And the more I hear about it, the more I'm like, I feel like I need to study like the Jewish mystics and like really like dive into them. I feel like
love that. You would love
I feel like I should buy some more books. Yeah, I'm literally like teaching myself how to speed read right now because like I have so many books piled up. It's so silly.
I have so many books piled up. It's like painful to look at sometimes.
I'm reading an actual book from the 60s or 70s about ESP right now.
Of course you are.
And I fucking love it. I'm kind of into, that's why I liked when I heard that the Starhawk book was from the 90s, you said?
Yeah, it's like 1930.
I'm kind of like digging like
some older stuff.
But Anyway, yes, going back to what you were saying, it's so easy for us to like look at how our day to day is with our given belief systems, right? And like the collective belief systems, like we're kind of growing up in this society that has like a lot of Christian fundamental, like underlying values and things like that. And to just assume that this is like everyone's reality and this is like what reality is. And it's just so not the case at all. Like there's so many things about like how we even think about like time and space that are like outdated.
Like the one of the need to be like correct and everything. I was like, that's actually like, I didn't realize it, but that's not a belief that everybody has, but it does feel like most people have that belief.
Yeah.
You know, the need to be like correct. That's something my dad was also very good at. He does not have that need. It's a very ego, like,
oh, interesting.
Driven. He has always been so comfortable saying like, we don't know. I don't know. And I was always.
And you had that modeled for you. Yeah. That's amazing. I did not have that at all. I feel like I was.
He's rare in that way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So wait, I want to touch back on, there were 2 lines in this that were still at the end of this
post by Xavier. Yes.
That I really loved because he talks about the war consciousness and what that sounds like. I want you to do this thing that if you don't do it, I'm going to attack you, or I can't stand you and you must be eliminated. And then he says, here's peace consciousness, in my opinion. There are many things that you're into that I do not agree with. Some of them trigger me profoundly. And yet I can still see our shared humanity. I release the need to impose my will upon yours. And that was like one of my favorite parts, because that is what needs to be done on the micro level, which not a lot of us, myself included, are not great at doing. Because when we disagree with someone's beliefs, we're so quick to just be like, you're an idiot. And
right. You're wrong. Like shutting them down.
You're wrong and you're an idiot.
Yeah. I feel threatened by that. Yeah.
And like, I'm going to stop talking to my family members because we don't agree, or friends. Now we're no longer friends now because we don't have the same beliefs. I mean, I've gotten into this conversation with friends where they're like, I could never date someone who is like completely the opposite of me, like politically. And I get that. But like, my question has always been like, do you think that that's actually like helping the world as a collective? If you can't like have conversations or be in relationships with somebody who you don't see eye to eye.
Think different. Yeah.
Because I see it on both sides in such dramatic ways. And so I love that he called out the peace consciousness, what he calls the peace consciousness, because I think that's, again, how do you have an impact on the world and what you can do? And it's that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It is that. Because anytime you get to know someone who has a different like philosophy or belief system from you, that is where you see the shared humanity in the person who you don't necessarily see eye to eye with. And that, quite frankly, if you're interested in changing other people's points of views, that's how you change their point of view, is by 100%. Getting to know them and to be like a human to them. It's literally like what queer.
And be willing to have your point of view change too. Like willingness to learn from another person. Like it's huge. Like everything you're saying here is like, whenever it was last year, 2 years ago, I literally, time has just like mushed.
I know. I don't know.
I don't even know. I don't know. And you're in LA. You don't even have seasons. At least I have seasons to try to keep track.
I have no idea how long I've been
it's
here.
Just a mushed,
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know how old I am. I don't know anything at this point.
Same.
Like I know it's Monday only because we're recording this podcast and we do that supposedly on Mondays. So
what are Mondays even, like, really?
I don't know. But when initially, like, there was the Black Lives Matter movement and all of that, like, really important things that were happening. And I was just, like, witnessing my, like, friends and family members just going at each other's throats. It was so sad. And it was a lot of younger people just fucking tearing their parents and their aunts and uncles and these old people that are, like, trying to, like, still figure out Facebook. Like, they're just, like, ripping them a new one. I was like, wow, this is not helping anything.
No.
Like, yes, absolutely 100%. This is not diminishing the fact that like racism is a real, true, and big problem. But the question is like, how can you have effective conversations? Because if the point is we need to get to a place where we're not racist anymore, we need to address this systemic racism in us, you need to be able to have effective conversations, and jumping down people's throats, making them feel like a piece of shit. It's war consciousness what that is.
Yep.
It does not help. It immediately puts people on their heels. Shaming somebody into like trying to change their mind or humiliating somebody, it is so much less effective. This goes back to like bro marketing. It's bro marketing, guys. Like we need to go into like you need to find that thread of empathy, like the thread of what is our like common humanity, and then figure out how to have an effective conversation from peace consciousness. Like that is so huge. And I remember back when all that was happening last year, I was just I made a post on my Instagram. I'm like, you guys need to practice like nervous system regulation when you're triggered because of your like racist uncle, like calm your shit down so you can like have an effective conversation with them and like hopefully maybe shine a light on a thing, you know, and maybe you're going to have like learn to have like more empathy and understanding for them and for like where their thinking is. Cause like we so quickly just like assume that people are malicious and bad and have like evil intent when likely what is behind that is something that you can agree with, which is probably like, they don't want to feel like they're a bad person. They want to feel like their story matters. And those are things that you can agree on. And there's your chord of empathy.
And there are a few things I want to touch on. One, the reason I thought that the peace consciousness that he called out was so powerful is because of what he says, like kind of next. Because he says, he acknowledges, of course, these are oversimplifications, whatever, but this has never been a better time to ask you how these thought forms are alive within you, right? Because this is the way we move through the world. That's like what he's calling out, I believe, is like, are you operating from a war consciousness? And that's how you're trying to affect change, or from a peace consciousness, which I think is far more effective. And then he says, you are far from being a powerless witness. Your compassionate awareness is a targeted light, and we're getting through this too. And I was just like, wow, that is it. Because that is how you show up with all of that's going on in the world, as horrifying and awful as it is. And you play your part to move forward to make the world a better place. Because quite frankly, you're not going to be boots on the ground and like, like helping physically in the fight. So what do you do? And remembering that you are powerful in how you show up in the world and what you like put out. It's just like, it's a reminder we all need so bad. Yeah. And that was like one of my favorite parts, because it's so easy to fall into hopelessness and to think like you don't play a role, but you do. You do play a role. You play a role in what you share and who you talk to and how you communicate. And if you can get out of bed in the morning and like take care of your children, or like be there for family members, or show up in your community, that is like a reminder we all really, really need. And I think that I do want to touch on, because I know you believe this, and I've really like learned this piece from you, especially like with BLM and like other things that have happened in the last few years, is that I do think that anger is an important step. And I think that it's important to remember that when people are angry because they've been oppressed or harmed or whatever, I do think that it's like an important first step. And again, I totally snagged that belief from you, because you've explained that to me so many times. And it took me like a full year to be like, oh. And I just wanted to touch on that, because it wasn't like talked about in your last example of like, you know, people communicating and how we're doing a poor job in a lot of ways of communicating with people who we don't see eye to eye with. Because I do think it's important to acknowledge that, like anger is a good first step. But if you get stuck there, that's where it's a problem.
Destructive if you get stuck there.
That's where it's like not good for you. It's not good for the collective. It's not good for people in your life. You're not nearly as impactful when you stay stuck in that place. You're just not.
Yeah. Because it shuts people down instantly. And it's not, don't be angry. Like there's plenty to be angry about. It's like, be aware of your anger and be effective with like how you interact with people. And right?
You know, I'm never going to say don't be angry. Like that shit is powerful. Use it to your advantage.
Yeah. And I feel like, I know we've like mentioned this before, but like to kind of go with what you're saying, like, that angry part is necessary and important. Like, and I feel like so often we'll witness other people in their anger, right? And they're fully experiencing it. And we're like, they shouldn't do that. And they should stop and they should be. Are they being super effective with their anger and perpetuating peace, consciousness, and connecting with empathy? No. But I think like it's a really important part. And I think there are people, and I know me, I can speak for me. That's a part I skip. And that's a part that I've skipped for most of my life because
it's uncomfortable.
Anger was uncomfortable. I viewed it as bad. I never was taught about anger. I was never taught about like how powerful and like effective it could be. It was like a negative thing in my mind. And so it's something I avoided acknowledging within me or expressing. And that wasn't good. Like, I feel like that kind of festered, you know, and it is an important part. And I'm on a tangent here.
No, I love it. It's true.
Yeah.
This keeps popping in my head because it's something that, I don't know, I think about. But because it's like, what is a good model then? For like what is actually affecting change. And this is probably going to feel a little silly, but I like really believe it. And I keep thinking of the show Queer Eye because one of the things I love about that show, first of all, that is like I don't know if guilty pleasure is even the right word, but I just like love to put that show on and just like bawl my, like just like bawl.
Yeah.
It makes me cry every single time. I could cry just thinking about it. I love those people so much.
Yeah.
But what they do so fucking well is this. They go into the lives of people, and it's not always this case, but oftentimes they go into the lives of people who have never met a gay person, who have never like come across somebody who's queer. They're just themselves. And they're not like forcing, you know what I mean? They're not forcing a conversation. They're very like empathetic. And sometimes it's challenging for them. Like there was this one episode with like, where it was like a very religious person and like Bobby was having a hard time because how the church treated him when he was younger. But like the end result is that these people get to, you know, so many of the people they interact with are like, I never knew a gay person. Now I know 5, and you're all such beautiful, wonderful people. And it's so transformative when they have, because you see them having these conversations where they don't agree with each other and they don't see eye to eye on things. And then like, I don't know, JVN will be like, yeah, but have you considered this? Or maybe now that you like know a gay person, this is something that you'll like won't think the same way about. And they're like, you're absolutely right. And to me, it's just such a like, yes, it's very like commercial or whatever, but it's also like, I don't think like what they're doing is actually like really incredible. And I like love them for it. And that to me is like a really mainstream, I guess, and a little bit of a quirky model for like what it actually looks like to actually affect change in the world and opening people's eyes to seeing things the way you see things. Because that's what they're doing. Ultimately, that's why it's so good and so like profound and makes me cry every time. It's because they're seeing those people and making them feel loved and seen and understood. With, and in turn, those people's like hearts are just expanding to them.
You're human too. Yeah.
And then they're seeing their like shared humanity. And these people have like nothing in common. I mean, sometimes they do, but like the ones that like really hit me are the ones where they have nothing in common. They would never, ever interact in like a normal day-to-day life. And that's what makes them so profound.
Yeah.
And that's what we need more of. We just need more fucking Fab Five.
Yeah. And another element of that is those 5 queer men are operating in their gifts, like in what lights them up. Like, so it's actually a really brilliant example of this because they are in their authentic self in so many ways, you know, and they're operating within the areas of things that light them up. And it could be doing hair. It could be like, the thing is it's just like, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's your thing, it's your thing. You know what I mean? And I think so many times we quantify like, oh no, this is like, I can't, like my slime story. I can't, like, that's stupid. I could have just been like, that's stupid and not have done it. But instead, I made slime and I had so much fun with so many kids for like almost 2 years. And it was like really great. Now, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that had a positive effect on the world, like just making people happy with slime. Silly example. But it's just like the idea of when we like say, oh, well, like the thing I really like love to do is hair. And like, how is that like, oh, I should do like what you're doing. There was like, you wanted to do science or you wanted to be a social worker. And now you're like teaching people how to completely change their life doing copy. And it's like your thing that you're doing right now. And that's like, that goes back to like the whole conversation of like, it's so important for all of us to be doing our thing, to like, to the best of our ability, be able to like get clear on what your soul is like saying to you and like do that thing. And that is sacred and should be protected and honored and all the things. And just, I'm having like a traffic jam of thoughts, but yes.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I think the big takeaway here is really that like, your thing is important and it's not too small and it's okay to keep doing your thing in light of everything that's going on. In fact, we need you to.
Yeah.
It's really
important. Yeah. It's not too late.
You're not a powerless witness.
Yeah. Yes. And how you're showing up in like the small little moments of your life matters. And have you ever, for instance, like you're driving and somebody has road rage at you, that like affects me. There are times that it like really affects me. There's other times where I'm like, okay, like this person's having a really bad day. I'm going to just send some compassion. But there are other times, like, especially if I feel like somebody did something that like put me at risk, me and my children in the car at risk, mama bear will come out and that'll like really upset me. And that's like a -1. We've all gone down into war consciousness there. Like that wasn't great. But have you ever been like in the car, like at a red light and looked over and like saw people like dying laughing? Has that ever happened to you?
Or dancing?
I cannot even begin to tell you, like, I remember this one occasion. I probably even really couldn't even pick out like road rage with this much clarity. Like, this is how much it stuck in my head. I was just like at a red light and there were these two guys behind me, like that you could tell, like it was the like ab pain, tears running down your face, dying laughing. They're like slapping the dashboard. I could hear them. Like I could hear how loud they were laughing all the way in the car behind me. And I started cracking up just from them cracking up in my rearview mirror. And I remember these dudes like, and I have no idea what was going on, but their joy got on me and I felt it and it affected me and it affected my day. It affected my kids because like these guys were just like laughing about whatever. And like, so the whole idea of like that you are powerful in those even small moments and that your joy is really powerful. Your despair is powerful too. But like, let's focus on that contagious peace, consciousness, and joy. And like, what does that look like? That's like, I'm like so interested in that in a big way.
Me too. Me too. I think we all needed a little bit of this right now. It's funny because I've started to believe this stuff, believe in this way, kind of how we're talking about all of this. But this is the first time I've felt confident enough to say it out loud because I've been believing this for a few years now, but I've also been so scared of being viewed as somebody who like doesn't give a shit. Like I still watch the news, but I just don't, it's different. It's from a different place. And I'm much more aware of my own energy levels and I'm much more protective of them. And I feel like I honestly like have the right to do that. Whereas I didn't before. I didn't. I just felt like I was supposed to be at the mercy of everybody else's beliefs. and of the media, and it's not how I can serve this world the best. And so I've been pushing back on it for a few years now. And now it's like the first time I've ever felt comfortable saying it out loud.
I think that's because like I hope it gives like other people permission to be like doing what is like ultimately going to be really good for them. And only like those people can decide what that is. Cause sure, there are people that maybe should be more informed or maybe whatever.
Well, we're going to have different degrees.
Yeah. I think just like giving you permission to like do what works for you, like what truly is working for you, and letting yourself be curious around maybe taking inventory.
All of this.
Yeah. Of like what's dragging me down. Like those things need to be a no.
One last little thought is that the whole idea of like, oh my gosh, not another thing. I'm like, if you look at history, there's always a thing. You know what I mean? Like our grandparents lived through World War II. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I'm just saying that's like, there's always things. And for me, expecting there to just like, this is a part of like, what is like the human experience, are these big things that we collectively navigate. And then my part is to figure out how can we collectively navigate it better. It feels less traumatic and it makes me feel like less of a victim. And I think that it also has really helped in my relationship with Ben because, I mean, his grandparents are Holocaust survivors. So he has said things like that to me where I'm like, you're so right. He's like, these are our things. And there will always be the things that we're navigating collectively on a global scale. And it's not great, but if you acknowledge that that's like part of the reality of like human existence, it's far less victimizing and traumatic.
My girls at school, there's this saying that they do at school where at the end of the day, they'll ask when they're doing their like closing circle, they'll ask the students, does anybody have a rose or a rosebud to share? And the rose represents like a great, wonderful thing that like brought them a lot of joy in school. And then they'll say, did anybody have any thorns that you want to share? And where the kids can share like, this was hard today. And Lila, I picked her up from school last week and she was like, today was awful. She was like, it was all thorns. There were only 2 rosebuds and everything else was thorns. And I remember like talking to her and being like, and us like diving into this kind of what you're saying, where I'm like, Lila, there's always going to be thorns. There's always going to be thorns, but you get to decide on if you want to focus more on the thorns or you want to focus more on the rosebuds, and what are the ones you want to like take home with you, and like the ones you want to like talk about. It doesn't mean that the thorns aren't there and they're sharp and they hurt and they're important, but there was still this beauty in the midst of it, which is like why I think the school gives that visual, which I think is really brilliant and smart. But like, it's this conversation me and Lila have been having of like, how can you have thorns and still really have a wonderful day? You know, just because there was a thorn doesn't mean it's a bad day, and that kind of attitude. So we're like kind of on a global scale, like dealing with a lot of big thorns.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
But I guess, I don't know. Can your joy, your peace consciousness be the rosebuds?
I love the peace consciousness. Love it. Because it's like, what can you do to cultivate peace consciousness on a day-to-day is really like the end question here. And how are we collectively like not doing that? Because I don't think we're doing a great job, honestly. But I think part of it is because we minimize those small actions.
We think they're not powerful. So why do it?
But they are.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good catching up with you.
This is good.
I love you. And until next time, guys, we have our Patreon. It is still, we're uploading new episodes to there every other week. There's a lot of juicy stuff waiting for you there. It's patreon.com/innerarchaeology. And
I would also like to say, apparently you can like rate the podcast and write reviews. And I guess when you do that, it helps our podcast. So visibility, which is great, which is fun. So if you guys feel like you've enjoyed it, and we welcome peace consciousness in the reviews. If you're in war consciousness,
no, I don't even think we have to worry about that.
No, but yeah,
okay.
And we love hearing your feedback. It actually is like so encouraging. Like when we like hear feedback or that we're like connecting to you. Cause sometimes I'm like, I just feel like we're like putting it out into the world. I'm like, whoa, like I'm having fun, you know?
Yeah, it's true. It's a whole weird thing when you put content out onto the interwebs where it doesn't feel really real until you hear back from people.
Until you're hearing feedback.
And then you're like, oh, and it's always surprising to me. I'm like, oh, your people are listening.
Like people listen to us. Yeah. So
let's keep going.
Yeah. Review us or rate us with stars or give us feedback. We love all of that. It makes it feel real.
You're so cute.
Okay.
All right. Until next time, guys.
All right. Bye.
Love you. Bye.